Hello and a warm welcome to Invest Africa. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen. Over the coming weeks, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the challenges and opportunities associated with investing in Africa. We'll be traveling up and down the continent, getting insight into the various economic territories across Africa. This week, we travel to Kenya, dubbed East Africa's powerhouse, to explore its growth potential and other pressing challenges the country is facing.
Spanning close to 600,000 square kilometers, Kenya is home to some 39 million people. Situated between Somalia and Tanzania, bordered by the Indian Ocean, Kenya is known as the regional hub for trade and finance in East Africa. A significant 22% of Kenya's GDP still stems from its agricultural sector, which employs over 2/3 of the labour force. The country has also posted significant growth in the service sector, which contributes just over 60% of GDP. This is mainly attributed to the rapid expansion of their telecoms and financial services over the past decade. Although the country is an exporter of coffee and fish, mainly to Uganda, Tanzania and the UK, Kenya is still a net importer of commodities such as iron, plastic and machinery to import partners India, China and South Africa. Between 2003 and 2007, the Kenyan government embarked on an economic reform program, which led to a gradual recovery of GDP to 7% in 2007 from 2.8% in 2003. However, this was dampened by violent outbursts preceding the general elections that took place late in 2007. The economic downturn was further intensified by drought and the global financial crisis, which posted GDP at less than 2% in 2008. The economy rebounded between 2009 to 2010. However, 2011 saw a growth of 4.3% due to inflationary pressures and sharp currency depreciation, which was fueled by increased costs in food, fuel imports and a shrinking tourism sector.
Now, coupled by the increase in the price of oil, it means that the economy then went into kind of a shock, and the economic growth slowed down substantially. We have recently started recovering. The stock market has started recovering slowly, but the threat still remains because the euro crisis is still there, the oil price is still going up, and the price of oil, once oil goes up, it affects our inflation in this country, and as such, you find that the interest rates go up, and therefore business suffer as a whole.
The establishment of the EAC came from the understanding that sustained growth can be derived from regional integration, with objectives including harmonization, tariffs and customs regimes, free movement of people and improving regional infrastructures.
What holds back our competition? Costs. It costs a tremendous amount of money to get our imports from Mombasa to Nairobi. We're one of the most expensive countries in the world to do that. Uganda is more expensive than we are. Rwanda is more expensive than we are. Why? Because those goods have to come through Kenya. That's the only reason.
This week, Kenya saw the first tranche of a $600 million international loan syndicate to the Finance Ministry. These funds will be used to support Kenya's ambitious infrastructure developments, especially roads, which are pivotal to Kenya's economic growth.
Now joining me in studio to give us their views on Kenya as a business and investment destination, Sven Richter, Head of Frontier Markets Renaissance Capital, Johnny Orkamp, General Manager, Strategic Relations and Business Development Africa at MTN Business, and Yaron Asabi, he's the CEO of Digital Solutions Group, and joining us from our bureau in Nairobi is Martin Odua Otieno, he's the CEO of Kenya Commercial Bank. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining me. Sven, let's start with you. This looks like a very positive story. Kenya, can we fault it?
Well, we think it's a very positive story. I mean, with Nigeria, Kenya and Nigeria are two biggest investment destinations for our sub-Saharan fund. I don't think we can fault it as an investment destination, but everything also has its challenges that you have to deal with. And as they mentioned, one of the biggest challenges that we have to deal with in Kenya is infrastructure.
Well, this is nothing new to the African continent story. Martin, let's throw it to you. One of the biggest challenges, says Sven, is infrastructure. How are we doing on the infrastructure front in Nairobi specifically?
The infrastructure has been a challenge, obviously, and it's now one of the focus points under the Vision 2030, whose objective is to make transform Kenya into a middle-income economy by 2030. And so there's a lot of work that is going on around infrastructure at the moment. A lot of road construction, financed and implemented by the programs out of China. There's construction and refurbishment around airports. We're also seeing the seaports, being worked on. So yes, there's recognition that infrastructure has been an issue, and that for any meaningful development to take place, that this has got to be a priority for government and indeed for private sector players.
Johnny, from an MTN perspective, what are you seeing on the ground? Experiencing the same challenge as we're hearing from both Martin and Sven.
So infrastructure is definitely a challenge. I think the cable systems are now into Kenya. It's quite a mature market. The problem is getting that connectivity back inland and making it less price sensitive than it currently is. There's a lot of challenges at the moment where you've got price competition, price wars. And I think we need to start moving away from that and move into the solutions environment. So what is it that can actually be placed within the Kenyan market, such as data center solutions, virtualization, cloud computing, that actually makes it significant for the people on the ground
to use it? Is that happening though?
It is to a point, but not as much. I think one point that was made a little bit earlier is that the endpoint devices, the taxation is still quite high. So as soon as you can start decreasing the price of those endpoint devices, modems, laptops, handsets, you start making it more available to the masses.
Yaron, let's get your thoughts on this. You've been nodding there while Johnny's been chatting away.
Absolutely. I think that applications are growing in the region. I think that Kenyans are generally very quick to adopt technology. We've seen the success of M-Pesa. It's a great African success story. And I think that Kenya acts as a hub for East Africa. And we're certainly seeing a very high maturity of market adoption rates. The operators that we work with are very, very advanced. And I think we're kind of leapfrogging a few technologies in Kenya. Kenya is very quick to adopt, and because of that, we're seeing them. Social media is huge. You can just see people walking into handset stores and asking for a phone that does Twitter and Facebook. I think 26% of Kenyans on Twitter. So it's quite amazing to see the adoption of applications, which is really our focus, and hence why we open an office there.
Martin, Yaron referring to the East African community and what is going right in the territory. Do you think that the East African community led by Kenya is ahead of what we're seeing out of ECOWAS, specifically when it comes to the free movement of people, capital and goods?
Well, there is still obviously room for improvement there, but what we've seen in the recent years is that the governments have renewed their commitment to make the free movement of goods, people, and commerce and trade generally, and investment much easier. KCB, which is the bank that I'm chief executive of, now operates in all the 5 countries of the East African community. We just opened up in Burundi about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And what I've seen over the last 5 years that we've made most of these investments is that there's been real sort of appetite and real support by the respective governments to get this whole regional investment thing back on track. We still have a few challenges around free movement of people, and of course the tax regime is still some way to go. But I believe that the commitment is there, and over the coming years we'll see this coming much more closely. A lot of it, in fact, is being driven by the private sector, because private sector is keen to go out and invest and make money and grow their businesses. So there's a lot of private public sector discussions, government to government and government to private sector groupings ongoing to accelerate this.
Sven, the tax regime has some way to go. How quickly do you think we're going to get reform on this front?
Well, it's always challenging exactly how far, how quick. I think one of the challenges that we do have now is obviously Kenya's going into elections. So I think during election, all those things will take a backseat. But, if we just look at the integration that there is now, And the fact that there was a history of integration previously, we as investors look at Kenya as a hub for the region, and not just us. If you look at headquarters of multinational firms, they're headquartered in Nairobi. You look at where the UN for East Africa is, it's headquartered in Nairobi. So everyone does think that this is the hub, and we think a tax will come about, people will be able to move, and it's going to be, we think of Kenya as 120 million people, not 40 million people, because we incorporate everything. And as also you have oil finds in places like Rwanda, not so much Rwanda, but Uganda, and also now in Kenya, all of that will flow through Kenya back and forth in terms of the transportation, and the money is being invested into the railroads and into the improvement. So we think it's a big integration coming.
Regulation must be a headache on your side, Johnny.
I mean, I hate to comment always on regulation, because regulation in Africa generally is a bit of a challenge.
You just got to live with it.
You got to live with it. You got to obviously work with it. I mean, that's the whole point of MTN working in Africa, as we work with the regulations. I think it's using what we have in place at the moment. Like in Kenya, there's a universal access fund. That universal access fund may not be used as significantly as it should be used. We have them in Zambia. We have it in Ethiopia. You have them, well, when it does completely deregulate. You have it in Tanzania. Now, what are they using the universal access fund for that can benefit the end customer? At this stage, I don't see it happening. And it's for the private guys to say, MTN, to go to the government and say, this is what we'd like to do in some of the schools. This is what we'd like to do in some of the government institutions. Let's use some of those funds to make it beneficial. And I think I agree with the point that was made in Kenya. We really need to work with government to make it available.
How receptive are the regulators to the digital solutions? Now, of course, that also plays into MTN, but Facebook, Twitter, I mean, this is a new game, and it certainly flies in the face of regulation. I mean, you can't control.
Absolutely. I think that it's new, so therefore it's still being regulated. I think throughout Africa there's an uncertainty how to regulate, because they're trying to follow what's happening internationally and what's happening in Europe and in the States. But certainly the adoption is there. I think that Kenyans, as I said earlier,
Don't we need to just accept that there's no place for regulation in social media?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, the OTT players kind of are almost self-regulated, because the crowd is kind of determining where the regulation should go. So I think if Facebook comes out with a policy that people object to, then they make a big noise about it, and the same with Twitter. And I think for the regulators, it's very tough to kind of regulate an environment that's regulated by the crowds.
Martin, this is an interesting one. We're just going to pull out this section a little bit further, but how are you reacting to the social media wave from a Kenya Commercial Bank perspective? Have you got any thoughts for us there?
Yes, we are certainly in that social media space. If you you can find us at KCB Group, and what we are finding as a bank is that there's increased interaction clearly with our customers and other stakeholders through Twitter and also Facebook. So it's a revolution of its own, which I don't think that businesses can afford to ignore or to avoid these days. So I participate, my senior team participate, and we link up with other organizations, and I find that some of the issues that hitherto didn't come to light at senior levels are actually being brought to our attention much faster, and we've got to respond to them. So there's a sense in which we've got to find a strategy that deals with the social media positively, but also how we address some of the negative impacts which may come with it.
We're going to a quick commercial break. More on Invest Africa when we return. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Invest Africa. Kenya's 2030 vision is a development strategy aiming to accelerate growth, reduce inequality and manage scarcity. This will not only be reflected by the growth in its GDP numbers, but by the country's ability to transform itself into a magnet for business investment.
The largest share of Kenya's electricity comes from hydroelectric stations. However, when drought occurs, this reduces water flow, which inevitably causes a shortage in electricity supply. In a bid to become more energy efficient, Kenya is looking to build a nuclear power plant by 2017. And bearing in mind the 2030 vision of a sustained 10% per annum growth rate from 2012, a reliable energy source is key to implementing this plan. But an important question that needs to be answered is how attainable is this goal?
We're going to see unemployment increase. When you have productive young people who are unemployed, you cannot have your economy growing at 10% per annum. It's just unsustainable. It's not possible.
Despite the macroeconomic challenges that the country may face, the discovery of oil on Kenyan land came as a welcome surprise.
We have a population of over 120 million, and we have now discovered oil in Uganda. We still have oil in Southern Sudan, and also oil in Kenya. Tanzania has a lot of gas. So when you look at the whole thing, you find that the environment is positive and will contribute to economic growth.
Companies such as General Electric have found the country to be an attractive business destination, not only due to its geographical positioning, but to a weaker presence of trade unions.
The result of this, in form of the companies which are relocating from South Africa to use Nairobi as a head office. Airtel is using Nairobi as a regional headquarters. We have Coca-Cola has moved from South Africa, has built a headquarter here. General Electric has moved from South Africa to here. And many other companies have shifted their head offices to Nairobi. And the objective is to cover the region, because the region is now on a growth momentum as a whole. The other major development you can say is the development of the bond market. The Treasury, the government has issued a lot of bonds, and the Treasury bonds, and the market is very vibrant. Also, the government has come up with infrastructure bonds, which are also, used to raise money to finance infrastructure loans and many other areas.
Kenya will need to continue with improved political and economic policy formulations in order to retain its title as East Africa's powerhouse. Tumisha Machanyele, Johannesburg.
Still with me in studio is Sven Richter, head of Frontier Markets Renaissance Capital. Johnny Orkamp, he's General Manager, Strategic Relations and Business Development Africa at MTN Business. Yaron Asabi, CEO of Digital Solutions Group, and from our bureau in Nairobi, Martin Odua Otieno, he's the CEO, Kenya Commercial Bank. Martin, let's throw it back to you in Nairobi. Do you think that Vision 2030 is a realistic target?
Well, you've got to put a stake on the ground when you talk about this. And at the moment, what Vision 2030 is doing, it's providing that rallying call or rallying focus point that everything is then attuned to. And therefore, what we are seeing is programs that across all the sectors of the economy that are aimed towards achieving the targets for Vision 2030. If we look at what's happening, as we've discussed, on the infrastructure side, a lot of initiatives that are meant to support the other sectors of the economy through development of infrastructure. If you look at the institutional strengthening on the back of the recently, recent new constitution, again, a lot of those are all targeted at supporting the Vision 2030 objectives, and even in the social sectors. So across the economic, social, and political pillars of Vision 2030, everything is tuned towards that. There will obviously be challenges. I mean, there was delay in terms of the whole inception of Vision 2030 because of the challenges post the last elections in 2007, 2008. And so it took off to a slow start, but what we've seen in the last couple of years is that it's all beginning to come through, and we are seeing some of the flagship projects now beginning to come on stream. So I would say it's early days. I would say that the vision has been set. At the moment,
Martin, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back to studio at this point. Johnny, public-private partnerships, are they key to Vision 2030?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't do it without it. If you look at the three pillars that were discussed now, the economic, the social, and the political pillars, each one of those requires infrastructure. Government alone cannot put that infrastructure in place. It requires us to get involved. And if you look at the key Vision 2030, they've said it's in line with the Millennium Development Goals. So they've actually brought all of it together and they've said, let's break it down into these 5-year chunks. Now, to break it down into 5-year chunks, to do it by yourself as a government institution, not practical. To do it alongside private enterprise, very practical. We are willing to get involved. A lot of other private companies want to get involved. It's about government saying, I want to do this, who's going to help me?
Where's the money going, in your view, right now? With the discovery of oil in Kenya, have we gone back to oil mining and gas being the key hotspots?
It's very important, but it's not the only part of Kenya that we've seen opportunities and developments in. If anything, it's probably a bit too early to see the money really flow in terms of the oil because it's only just been discovered. It still has to be proven exactly how much it is, where it is, and then it'll be a 3, 4, 5-year program before they're going to see any oil come out of this. So yes, the money is going into research and into looking for this, but you also see money going into tourism, into technology, into all different parts.
Agriculture? How important is agriculture right now?
Agriculture is extremely important. If you actually look at the whole of Africa and just as Kenya as well, what we produce in Africa is very, very small in terms of what we can produce. And as the world grows, we need more and more production in Africa, but we need that to come with infrastructure. There's no use producing in a field and then seeing some of your cereal rot before it actually comes through to the port. So that's all very important. But sometimes, and I mean, you know what other people say in terms of private partnerships are very important, but sometimes you don't need so much, you just need the private. In terms of M-Pesa, sorry, I was getting a bit. M-Pesa was actually developed in a legislative vacuum. There was no, the Reserve Bank did not cover it, the cell phone companies did not cover it, and the regulator didn't cover it, and M-Pesa developed into the best solution in the world.
Yaron, I want to get some further detail on the ground, so to speak. How easy was it to set up your office in Nairobi?
The first issue was to find the right local partner, which we did, and I think that's always a key. You've got to have somebody that understands.
Did it take you a long time to find the local partner?
Yeah, we've been looking for a while. I guess we're quite cautious in Africa in general, so we did spend quite a bit of time investigating. We did find the right local partner. We believe that that's eased a lot of the local process. But our company is growing very, very fast in Kenya. We're seeing a great sense of entrepreneurship, and I think to achieve those economic goals that everybody was discussing in 2030, we need to encourage entrepreneurship. We need to see more Kenyans opening their own businesses in the small medium enterprise sector, and M-Pesa was a great example that everybody spoke about today because it created 92,000 entrepreneurs that could basically transact with M-Pesa.
Johnny, MTN had the ability to go it alone without a local partner, or do you advocate in favor of local partnerships when trying to establish in Kenya?
We take a very similar route. We actually try and use a local partner first, not only just to, we like them to provide the service for us. So we get a good feel, a good yardstick as to how they provide that service first. We then go into a more steady partnership with them, and I think then ultimately that would lead to other discussions such as M&A, such as strategic alignments for the coming years. Going it into any country in Africa is tricky. If you don't understand the regulations, you don't understand the legal implications, you don't understand the local ownership implications, specifically what the market wants, that is critical. And I think with a local partner, you overcome a lot of those obstacles initially.
Martin, let's throw it back to you. Of course, we can't have this discussion without touching on the element of corruption. Has corruption worked its way out of the Kenyan environment? Would you be bold, so bold as to say that?
Well, what I can say is that it's an issue. It's been an issue, and part of the governance reforms has been to put in place institutions that will ensure that the punishment is such that it discourages completely attempts towards corruption. But I would say that just like in most countries, this is a problem that has got to be addressed, and Kenya is no exception.
Sven, your thoughts on corruption? Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're going to have to close out on this issue.
There's less corruption now than there was in the past, and the path is towards more and more less corruption. But there still is, and it's not just a factor in Kenya, it's throughout the emerging markets. Is
it ultimately going to work its way through the system?
Has it worked its way through the system in developed countries? Again, it's difficult to do a comparison. Africa is what it is, Europe is what it is, and America is what it is. So you work within what you have. There are regulations, there are a lot of challenges to overcome. But I think, as the larger corporates start going into these areas, you can't be susceptible to those types of claims. So.
But we must be realistic about what we're dealing with on the African continent. Yaron, just finally thoughts from your side.
I think as we move towards mobile commerce and e-commerce, there's more accountability, so there's an
and
audit trail, more transparency, and therefore I think we're going to see that Africa is hopefully going to get rid of its corruption fairly soon.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. We've come to the end of this week's edition of Invest Africa. We'll be back again at the same time next week. Until then, from me, Bronwyn Nielsen, and my guests, it's goodbye.